right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, I have been friends with my guests now for many, many years. We've seen an evolution of the digital landscape, quite substantial through the time that I've known this gentleman. One of the things that's always struck me as fascinating is his take on the industry, especially the digital landscape. When you look around, they're actually playing from yesterday's playbook and they're expecting today's results with yesterday's playbook. And there's a significant disconnect there. Our guest has not only been is privy to what today's playbook is, but he also knows what tomorrow's playbook is going to look like. And I think you're going to get a sense from today's conversation why I brought him in on this podcast as a 7, 8 figure CEO and founder. You're always looking to get that edge and get that advantage. And digital is a massive component to making that happen for you. And so that's why we're talking about this today, how to really dominate the digital landscape using today and tomorrow's playbook. So without further ado, Andrew Young from Core and More Technologies, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no worries. Andrew, I want to kind of break things up into two different conversations. And let's start actually with SEO. What is the biggest difference in SEO, say 2 years from now, compared to where it is today?
That's a great question. I mean, think about where we were back in 2022 versus where we are now when nobody was even talking about AI yet, really. At least not in the mainstream as we are now. AI now has traction, it has legs, it's real, and we're feeling its effects all around us. What in the world is that going to look like in 2 more years as AI will make personalization even smoother and shift even more from generating content to making more efficient use of data, right? And that's really what the basis of SEO really is, right? Search engine optimization is evolving to become search everywhere optimization. But at its core, the reason why Google became who they are and carved out 98% consistent 98% market share is because they're the greatest relevance engine probably in human history. So how to maintain that relevance in an age of AI when you have the rise of chatbots, AI chatbots, some of which are driven by Google's own Gemini. And then you have, of course, OpenAI's products, not the least of which is ChatGPT, which is taking on a lot of different forms like Monica and other Chrome extensions.
And you have GPT Search
GPT coming out, right?
Yeah.
Which hasn't even really hit the open market yet. And then, of course, Copilot, Microsoft's Copilot.
Yeah.
So we're really growing well beyond the search engine to the point where now social media has become a search engine. I mean, 40% of Gen Zers are using TikTok to search. That's crazy. And think about how much that's going to increase as time continues to go by to 40, 50, 60, and then they start to enter into the workforce.
You know what's funny? You'll probably never guess my 2 favorite search engines. Perplexity being one. I love it, which is an AI-based search engine. And the second one comes as a big surprise for most people. Grok, which is X's AI, Grok, is a killer search engine. I seldom use Google now.
Right. I mean, the market has shifted already. It's already shifted beneath our feet. And I recently wrote a LinkedIn post. I'm doing a series of 16 marketing trends for 2025. And marketing trend 3, I believe I titled it, New Search Platforms Will Play an Increasing Role Alongside of Google.
Yeah.
So, and think about some of the takeaways I listed from that at the outset were that in terms of visits per desktop user per month across AI sites since 2023 and through mid-2024, because the data is accruing so quickly we can't even keep up, ChatGPT increased from 10.4 to 10.6, and Perplexity, as you mentioned, increased from 10.9 to 15.59. And then Claude increased from 6.39 to 10.67, and Copilot increased from 6.75 to 7.7. And Gemini, Google's own Gemini, increased from 5.8 to 6.8. And Google, meanwhile, increased from 161 to 163. So that's without, like you mentioned, even factoring in the rise of Search GPT. And one has to wonder, right? The next question is obviously, is Search GPT going to kill SEO? And the answer is conclusively a hard no, at least not anytime soon. I mean, Google maintains 87% US market share, and it's even higher globally outside of China, where, of course, Baidu is the primary search engine. But the crawlers go, I mean, they're working night and day. I mean, it's like, I remember being in San Francisco and taking a tour around San Francisco Bay, and they tell you the story about how they paint the Golden Gate Bridge. They start at one end and they get all the way to the end. And then what do they do when they're finished? They start all over again and go back the other way. And they repaint the entire bridge. And they do this on an ongoing basis. I've never seen them doing it, but I take their word for it that that's what they're doing. It's like the algorithms. I don't see them working, but I know that they are working. And how is Google going to maintain their relevance? Well, a lot of it is branching out, right? Is going beyond. I mean, it's such a big question as search continues to evolve beyond even Google, right? And that was another marketing trend, is really Google wants to keep users on the platform, but how well can they continue to do that? I mean, there's a greater emphasis on platform engagement strategies. Like, since Google's enhancing its search engine result pages with like dynamic AI overviews, videos, and all that good stuff, really it's essential for agencies, businesses of all kinds, to optimize their own platform assets to capture users' attention a little bit better. Like, for example, focusing on high quality Google shopping ads as we're heading into Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Product feed optimization, leveraging visual content, right? Like, today's blog posts that I put out, the marketing trend number 5 is all about leveling up. And what we're seeing right now is visual search is becoming a big part of the equation, right? So what we call sense search, right? So visual search is expected to go, Zion Research released a report recently where the compound annual growth rate for visual search, it's expected to grow at 17.4% from 2024 to 2032. And we already know that there's over 10 billion visual searches being processed by Google Lens.
Oh, through Google Lens. And actually, Apple just came out with it too, where you can take a picture on your iPhone and then you can do a search within the photo.
Crazy.
I agree, SEO is not dead, but SEO is taking a different form.
Right.
It used to be a couple years ago, you go to these backlink farms, people were just buying backlinks all over the place. And then Google kind of wisened up to it and they're like, hey, there's a EAT algorithm that, really ends up, if you want to score well, you have to understand like EAT and what we're looking for when it comes to that. Because the same thing, like if you want to rank well for AI, like AI is looking for the experts, right? They're going to feature expert content and whatnot. Just because you have a backlink on some no-name blog doesn't actually mean that AI search engine is going to be like, oh, there you go, you win. There's a deeper level of context. So knowing that and the EAT algorithm, can you kind of explain to our listeners what is the EAT algorithm and why is that so important for SEO today?
100%. So EAT is the acronym and it actually stands for experience, right?
So let's go kind of one at a time. So if I want to maximize experience, how do I do that?
Well, it's really all about talking about your actual background, right? It's sharing your it's the persona and personalization, right? Like, I'm giving you a personal account of my experience, right? And everything, like, I think the number, and don't quote me on this, but the number that we had released recently was 31% of marketers are actually personalizing. And that 31% are winning. Like, personalization wins. We know that. The way that we do it, and this is something that we recommend, it's a great question, is typically when we're getting into any of our marketing initiatives, the very first thing we do is we build buyer personas, right? And it doesn't really matter if we're marketing for a B2B company or a B2C company.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound a little bit cheesy, I admit it, but there's a C behind every B, and it's not just in the alphabet. There's a consumer behind every business. So if you're marketing to, a huge conglomerate, say if it's a managed IT company or it's a giant CRM platform like a Salesforce or an MSP of some sort, the decision maker may be the CFO, but what are the propensities of that CFO? What is the thing that you can say to that CFO that's going to appeal to that CFO at a gut level? What's the value proposition? So the persona development is key before putting a pen to paper. In this case, before putting any muscle behind the research that we're doing, because obviously once we get beyond the experience part, we're going to get into the expertise part, and we're going to want to talk about, your knowledge level and your skill level with the topic at hand. They kind of go together. We want to make sure that before we even get into the E part, I should mention, we want to confirm that we're actually going after the right terms, the right queries, because guess what? If we're not, we're building a bridge to nowhere. We're going to spend a whole lot of money, but how do we really know that optimization is going to pay off? And what is the payoff? Like in the end, we're adding value to the web, but we're also in business to make a profit, right? And so we're almost acting as an investment advisor. Now, whether or not you're doing this as a practitioner or you're an agency like mine, or you're just providing consulting services, at the end of the day, it's all about, Google has been saying ever since the beginning, right? Let's go all the way back to Marissa Mayer days, that ideas are coming from everywhere, but you want to add value to the web, right? Larry Page said that was one of the 10 things that Google relied upon, that they knew to be true, is that, you're going to find a lot of value in being real. And, they're carrying that through the experience and expertise principles of the EAT process into the now and really even into the future.
What you just said is really important that, a lot of people will overlook. One of the highest viewed pages on my blog has something to do with an article that we wrote about Nokia. Now, we published it years and years and years ago. I don't even really know why we did it, but it was, back in the day when it was like, you got to make sure you keep your blog active. And it was kind of like a case study, right?
Mhm.
And so we get a lot of traffic. Now, you're going to get some like SEO agencies that will turn around and they'll say, hey, here's some low hanging fruit. You can have this Nokia thing, and that's going to drive a whole bunch of traffic over to your website. But the advice for that is all about traffic. They're looking at the wrong thing, because what you're looking at, as you mentioned, you do a buyer persona. You say, okay, what's a buyer persona? What are some keywords that are worth investing in, to use your term? And then let's go after it. Nokia, who comes to the Nokia page? Students.
Right.
Students who are doing a report on Nokia. And, so we'll get flooded by students. They're not buyers. We've never had a high quality lead coming in off of that Nokia page, a whole bunch of students. Now, investment. What does that mean? Well, under most cases, for a mid difficulty keyword, they're not going to get ranked on page one overnight. How long does it take today, on average, for just an average, competitive keyword to get ranked on page one?
That's a really good question. And I'd say at least 30 days on average. Now, average is a term that, let's define that for the audience. So when we look at average, what Google is going to tell us, and the tools that spring off of Google, whether it's SEMrush or, SpyFu or any of the other great tools that are out there, they typically rank low, medium, and high. And the way that they come to that nomenclature is comprised of two factors. One is the amount of activity, that is search queries that are occurring against that query. And the other is the number of additional agencies or others that are trying to vie for positioning against that keyword. And you could take a look, just open up the keyword planner in Google Ads, and it'll show you what the CPCs are. And that alone can tell you. Now, that's going to be a variable, though. And so when we talk about average, that average is a moving target. For example, accounting services are going to be $30 to $40, maybe even $50 per click in New Jersey on March 31st, but on April 10th, I think, or maybe let's say April 20th, the day after, taxes are due, that number is going to drop probably 50%. Those averages can change, and we act almost as investment advisors when we're recommending what keywords our clients really should be investing in. And investing is really the right word because it is an investment.
To segue a little bit, right? So many people have a budget set aside, right? So
Mhm.
whatever that number is, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever it is, they have a budget.
Right.
And they're like, okay, Andrew, here's my budget. And now, as an investment advisor, which is, I like the way that you phrase that, Andrew. That's a really powerful tool for many ways. Because I know the way that you work, like you're going to say, okay, based on your goals and your investment,
Mhm.
here's how I would allocate this across a number of different strategies. And then do you also act as a portfolio manager, where, in other words, when you allocate the budget across different categories, does that change? Say the CPA firm example, does that change based on, you know, the month and where you're getting the best CPCs and CPLs and all that other stuff? Like, kind of walk me through sort of like there's an art and science behind actually getting the most amount of leads for the least amount of price.
Absolutely, 1000%. And it's a great question, and you worded it really well. And just backing up to thinking about it as a portfolio, yes. And portfolio, I think, can be viewed as, especially in the B2B world, synonymous with vertical markets. So we had, for a specific client and out in San Mateo, California, and they were heavily invested in the mass notification, which is to say the type of system that's used to notify thousands of civilians simultaneously across various channels, like giant voice outdoor speaker arrays that you don't see, but you hear them
Yeah.
over a city, or SMS-based messaging, or landline phones, and the RDS, the radio data system on your display in your car. Well, there's a lot of competition for those types of keywords, and that speaks to one vertical. It's more along the lines of the citizens, because
Mhm.
citizens just seem to, they search on mass notification, like, how do I get notified? And they're looking for those systems, and they're opting into those systems. And the
Yeah.
typical opt-in is free, but it's a different thought process when it comes to the emergency manager who's in the driver's seat making the decisions for the procurement of those systems. They have always, what we've seen is they had a tendency to search more for emergency notification systems. Like, the word emergency was more pronounced in their mind versus the word mass notification was emergency notification. So there's these little nuances, and the value of the leads that we were getting from emergency notification versus mass notification was night and day, yet the CPCs were very similar. So you really don't know until you experience the difference between the two. So those are the type of nebulous things that you cannot predict at the outset. You have to get to know the buyer propensities. And I know we're really getting into the weeds on that, but that is the art and science, as you mentioned, Charles. The art and science is being able to differentiate and to identify and quantify those things. And how do you do that? And this dovetails into a little bit of, going into the measurement side, right? Because if we're making those investments, it's easy enough if you're working for Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan. And, you're saying, well, here's the investment that I'm recommending for you. And then you look at it in 3 days. Has it gone up? Has it gone down? It's a
Yeah.
little bit different with SEO. You're making an investment. You're buying backlinks, as you mentioned. You're developing content. You're optimizing Google My Business listings. You're doing all these different things. You're doing it on a regional basis. You're incorporating all the principles of E, like we described. You're leveraging experience, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. But the measurement, how do I know what that's really turning into? And having a back-end system to do all that for us, and the proper tagging, especially, what was it, back in the Panda? I'm going back many years. Update, when Google decided that they were going to mask the actual keywords that were being searched upon and bucket them all into a, not set
That was
like
years ago.
drove us all crazy. And it's
Yeah.
still to this day, it does. But with
Yeah.
the right systems in place, we can at least identify the organic traffic and we can measure that channel and the value of it versus CPC, versus referral, versus social. And we have to look at it over time. And then we can start to quantify, because with SEO, it's always going to be ROI. There's no ROAS involved, right? Because there is no ad spend. It's a ROAS, it's a ROI equation. So we can look over time and we can determine, wow, here's where the value truly lies.
Sure.
And it may be that we have higher click-through rates on a term, for example, like the one I use, mass notification versus emergency notification. But if the
Yeah.
mass notification keyword is resulting in, we're getting $5 million in revenue on a per deal basis because we're now reaching those emergency managers for different counties or even different states on a regional basis versus
Sure.
reaching students signing up for a system that's been implemented by a college or
Sure.
even college administrators. It's a whole different mindset. So all of this has to be taken into account and monitored on an ongoing basis. There is
Yeah.
no way in heck that you can just set it and forget it. It requires an ongoing analysis.
You're absolutely correct there. And it's not SEO or PPC. It's SEO and PPC because they play off each other. And
Right.
it's one of those awesome opportunities where you can actually get two listings above the fold if you have PPC and SEO. And when you have two listings and they're playing off each other, it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 equation. There's real data to support that. You'll end up getting a 1.33% improvement as opposed to 1 + 1 = 2. You get 1.33 when you have two of those working together. And again, if let's say you find this keyword, high intent keyword, and it's like, okay, this is awesome. Well, it takes a while to get that ranked SEO, but pay per click, you can get that immediately.
Instant.
And also, pay per click can then tell your investment advisor, hey, look, we're getting, when I say investment advisor, that's Andrew, right? But it's like, it says, hey, look, we're getting a cost per click at X. We're getting conversion rates. Your current ROAS sits at blank. The easiest way for us to increase the lead flow, reduce your ad budget, get you more traffic is now to allocate a portion of that into SEO, move that all the way up. And now you're going to see your ad costs go way, way, way down because there's always a portion of people that won't click on ads, but they will click on organic.
Yes.
So it's like, when you understand how all of that works, this is how you dominate that marketplace, right?
That's the word.
But you just can't go in and saying, I'm going to invest, $5,000 a month in SEO, or I'm going to invest $5,000 a month pay per click. Like, you don't do that. Instead, you have to, it's like a strategy you got to put together. And again, I really love the way that you worded that as an investment advisor. Like, an investment advisor turns around and they'll say, okay, we're going to put X% in heavy metals and gold, and then we're going to put some in the index funds, and we're going to put stuff in this and that, like that. They have it all sort of, spread out there, which is great. We talked about the EAT algorithm: experience, then expertise, and then A is authority,
Authoritativeness, yeah.
authoritativeness, and then the T is
Trustworthiness.
trustworthiness. So when we look at authoritativeness and trustworthiness, so you mentioned something, optimizing Google My Business and whatnot. What do reviews play in getting a number of reviews? What does that play in that EAT algorithm? If you get 100 5-star reviews, does that give you a bump versus somebody who might not have any reviews?
Another great question. And the answer is 100%, but the schema markup has to be incorporated into your website. The Google algorithm is not going to know that Acme Company, this website that's Acme Company, is also this Google My Business profile that's Acme Company. And let's incorporate the value of their 500 5-star reviews and use that as link juice, if you will, as authoritativeness, another authoritativeness factor, if you will, to bolster the relevance of that website. The way to do that is you have to make that connection. Now, you can say on your Google My Business profile, yeah, this is my website, and point back to it. But that alone is not going to give you the structured data the schema markup that's required for your website to truly capture the Google juice that comes from those 5-star reviews. There's
Right.
simple plugins out there that do that for you now. It used to be we had to have developers go through pages one by one and make sure that the schema markup was all correct. You can do it if it's WordPress, or it doesn't even matter if it's a Wix site. There's simple ways to now do that. It's just a matter of knowing that you have to do it. So the short answer is yes, 100%. And even more so, we've seen a shift towards Google My Business for local clients. So like his AI overviews through search generative experience are becoming more and more prevalent. And you're going to see them in every single search,
Yeah.
probably in the next 6 months to a year, pushing down the organic listings. Well, they're not really impacting the Google My Business listings, though, especially on a mobile device. The Google My Business listings, you need to have that, especially for local companies. Like search on roofers near me. You're going to see local service ads. You're going to see Google My Business listings. Then you're going to see your Google organic listings. What if you have a trifecta on all of them? You have an LSA, you have a Google My Business listing, you have a Google ad, and an organic listing. That's a quadfecta. You're completely dominating now. And talk about authoritativeness. If
Mm.
not through the algorithms, and certainly through the eyes of the consumer. And on that note, we ran an experiment 2 years ago for a local client. And we discovered when Google rolled out the paid and organic reports through Google Ads, you can easily look at this stuff, both branded and non-branded. On a non-branded campaign, we looked at once we achieved top 3 rankings on a specific query, and we measured that query over the course of a year, they spent $105,000 on that keyword. It's not small change on that specific keyword set in the ad group, right? It was roofers near me, roofers, in this area, roofers, Middletown, New Jersey. $105,000. And what we discovered is when we achieved top 3 rankings on that keyword, the CPC dropped, get this, by 33%. And the click-through rate went up 33%. Like, wow. And that's the stuff that's not documented anywhere. Now, Google says you get that relevance and your CPCs will go lower, but there's nothing like that documented. We had to learn that through that experiment, which I was really stoked about.
And you brought up, when you talked about schemas and whatnot, that's a whole other conversation that we didn't even touch upon. And look, for our listeners out there, this might seem a little overwhelming if you're new to
Yeah.
digital marketing and whatnot. And I'm not expecting most of you to do this stuff yourself. But what I want to do is it's important for you to understand what's going on. So, you know, the right person to hire, the right questions to ask, and so forth.
Right.
As a quick side note, so one of the businesses that I started back in 2000, really 2000, I started a real estate development company. And I built roads, I built neighborhoods, the whole deal. And the first time I built a road, I just turned around and I'm like, I'm going to go for a road contractor that, gives me a great price that seems like they know their stuff. And I brought him in. And I brought him in, and sure enough, he started to overbill me, started to tell me things that wasn't actually correct, and we ended up in a lawsuit, and it actually, didn't turn out well for anybody.
Yeah.
So then the next time, I decided I was going to learn about building roads. Now, I've never been behind a bulldozer. I don't drive excavator. Never had to lay out any pavement, but I knew the difference between a good road and a bad road. So then when I brought in the road contractor the second time,
Right.
then he wasn't pulling any wool over my eyes. I knew exactly what to look for, and we had a greater output at the end of the day. The same thing goes here. You're not expected to do your own SEO. You're not expected to do your own PPC. I don't do it. I don't do my own. But you are expected to understand, what goes into good SEO, what goes into good PPC. So you can tell, do I have the right contractor and do I have the right people in place? Because there's a lot more people who don't understand this stuff than actually do understand this stuff. And you want to make sure you find somebody that does. Andrew brought up schema. That's another part of SEO, which is referred to as, technical SEO as well. People don't often think about technical SEO. But if your website is slow, if you don't have the right, mechanics behind the website for easy search and so forth, you're going to get penalized. Actually, not just in SEO, if the website is slow, you're going to get penalized when it comes to your PPC as well. And you're going to spend more money because Google puts emphasis on UI UX and good user experience, and they'll punish you. So tech
Yep.
SEO is also something important, and I know that opens a whole can of worms. But did you want to just
Yeah.
sort of like kind of briefly highlight tech SEO and the different things to pay attention to when it comes to that?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely, Charles. Thank you. And it really is one of the key elements of SEO success. And review schema is really like right at the heart of that, because as you're working so hard and you're establishing trust and credibility and all those pieces that fall under the trustworthiness, the T and the E, and not just from an SEO perspective, but really from a brand perspective. You're building your business, or your business is already built, and now you want to take it to the next level, to your point, and start to incorporate and bring together all of these various components that, beyond just your website, make you the great company that you are. Everybody should know about it. And they shouldn't have to do an alt tab to figure that out between browsers. It should all be right there.
Yeah.
That's where really technical SEO comes in. Technical SEO is foundational SEO is another way of saying it. Is really it's the basis of your website in terms of your schema, your H tags, H1, which is typically the headers on each of your pages. That may or may not be what you want to render in what we call the search engine result page, or search for sure. So if it doesn't have a title, then it's just going to take what it thinks is the best title. It's a lot better at that than it was 5 or even 10 years ago. But you want to define that. That should be part of an overarching strategy. So again, at the outset, and you mentioned kind of along the lines of the construction business, when I was in my early 20s, I was on a construction crew, and we always said measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
Same thing. What is going to be the value long term of our SEO? Well, what markets do we want to target? What do we want our buyer personas to look like? Pursuant to that, what keyword queries are the most valuable for us? What have been the most valuable? What does the trend line look like? We don't want to just optimize for something like we had mentioned, using the accounting as one instance, that's going to be hot once a year and then dead for the rest. And if that is going to be the case, sure, we put that in a different bucket, but we want to go after keywords that are going to be sustainable and consistently solid to the extent that we can. You can't predict everything, but you can look at data, and you can make digital marketing, data-driven digital marketing decisions. So laying the groundwork for those keywords, and then that should kind of funnel down into the structure of your website. So your homepage, and then you go into your next stage, your ancillary pages, whether it's vertical markets or products or services, and then going into those things that support them, like your blog and your content development strategy. All of that should tie in together, and it should all feed the same keywords, the basic keyword set or sets, through your H tags, through your H2 tags, which are the next level down, and H3 tags, and across into your metadata. Like, for example, your meta title, right? Which is different from an H1. It's the actual title of the page. That's the link that you're going to click. So that, coupled with the schema, and also you want to keep an eye on broken links, Forex errors, and all of that kind of stuff. And then building, it's not really technical SEO, but it is in a way, because when you're thinking about the types of backlinks that you're going to be building, you want those backlinks to be solid, that are coming into your website, but also the interlinking among your website. So if you want to optimize for red Christmas bulbs, right? And like, that's just one page on your website, all the way down at the bottom, like at the bottom of the tree, just visualize a Christmas tree as your website. And you have this one little red bulb all the way down on the bottom. Well, what is the relevance of that red bulb? Now, if you have a full tree of red bulbs, you're going to be that much more relevant. When people walk in your house, they're going to say, wow, he really likes red bulbs on his Christmas tree, and he's the best with those red bulbs. Well, that's your website. And since that was the Penguin algorithm update, I believe, where you can't just build a single page anymore, stuff it with keywords, have a really high keyword frequency, and point backlinks at it, but that's the only page you got on your website, because the other person or the other company who's got 10 pages on their website and they spread it out, they're going to win in the search engines. That's another example of technical SEO.
One of the things, and I know we're gonna have to wrap things up here soon, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the topic of retargeting as well, as one of the big changes when it comes to paid media. Several years ago, I mean, retargeting was always important, in one of our board of directors sessions, it was interesting because a number of people commented on saying they had their best month ever. And it was exciting to hear that. And one particular gentleman, his name was Chad. I think you may remember actually this conversation. I said, "What's the biggest difference?" And Chad goes, "Well, I finally listened." We're like, "Well, what does that mean?" And he said, "You mentioned to allocate more of our budget towards retargeting than we had in the past. And so we added more into retargeting and our conversions went through the roof."
Wow.
So the question is, why do you have to do this retargeting? Why do you have to invest in retargeting? And that's because our buyers have become more discerning. Our buyers
Mhm.
have become researchers. In 2019, they looked at 17 different sources of information before making a buying decision. In 2021, that went up to 27. And that number continues to increase. Some sources are saying it's as high as 36 different sources of information before making a buying decision. It's insane.
Yeah.
So if you're not retargeting, as people are doing their research, you no longer occupy that space in the brain. And when it comes time to make a buying decision, they're not going to do it. We also know that consumption drives conversion. We've talked about this over
Love
and
it.
over and over again, right? Retargeting, be everywhere you can be. That's another massive, massive part to that strategy. But Andrew, I'm going to ask you my favorite question that I like to ask our listeners. This is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. What would you say is your biggest, best tip for our 7, 8 figure CEOs and founders that want to know, how do I get beyond 7 figures?
It's a pretty simple answer to a great question. And the answer is, to your point, consumption drives conversion. You can't just be on one platform. You must embrace an omnichannel approach, and you have to keep that base phrase,
Why?
personalization across all channels. You have to embrace those EAT principles, right? You have to establish trustworthiness. Because why is it that you need to touch somebody 36 times at this point? Why have buyers become so much more scrutinizing? I mean, even with a bottle of perfume that's the
Yeah.
same across different brands, like it's the same brand. It's Estee Lauder. It's a 3.5 ounce. It's the same exact perfume, yet they want to go to 5 different websites before they actually make the purchase.
Yeah.
Why is that? I don't know. I don't really know the psychology to answer that question, but that is what we're experiencing now. I think a good way of putting it is, how are we going to be of maximum service to the consumer? How do we fit ourselves to be of maximum service to the consumer? Well, how do we do that? Well, we have a message that's informed, and that informed message is based upon the informed decisions that we're making, because we have the best reporting capabilities in place of anybody in the market, a
Mhm.
world-class tech stack that tells us this is what's making us money, this is what isn't, this is where we should hedge, this is where we should invest further, and this is what we should put as an outlier maybe for the long haul. And having that structure in place in a holistic plan that includes AI chatbots, that positions for AI overviews, that positions for traditional search, because that's really not going anywhere either, which is why Sunday Pinchar told us at Google I/O about 6 months ago, now is the time to double down on SEO. Because by doing so, you're adopting principles that you can apply across all these different channels that are going to lead to excellent results. And by nature, you're simply going to be, by walking through those principled approaches, you're going to be embracing all of the good tenets and methodologies that we've talked about.
When we say omni-channel, what would you say? What are your top 5 channels?
Number one is still Google,
Yeah.
no doubt about it. And
Okay.
Google paid, because, as you said, you can use that as a barometer through which to test and validate before you spend
Yeah.
a penny on SEO.
Okay.
Because
So
you
we
can
got,
spend a fortune, you could blow a lot. And then a kind of distant second, because they have about 10% market share, I would still put Bing or
yeah.
Microsoft Ads as number
Yeah.
two. Meta advertising, I would put as number three, Facebook and Instagram combined.
Yeah.
You can't forget about TikTok at this point, but we could bucket all of them under social if we want. And that's typically what we do. So let's call it paid, Google, Bing,
Yeah.
social, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, and even to some extent Twitter, depending, or X, depending upon what you're marketing. Remarketing is a channel in and of itself because it spans all. And affiliate advertising is also, I think, important still. I mean, you want to push out press releases, right? You want to have validation outside of just your Google reviews. You also want to market yourself. You want to be, hey, press release. Hey, look at, predictable profits. Number one, look at Core and More Technologies. Last year, we improved our engagement by 26%. We improved our revenue by 107%. And you got that pushing out across Market Watch and all these other channels. And I don't think there's anything yet. And this is also omnichannel, because through the platforms that we're using now to measure our results, we can also, with 100% accuracy, quantify our offline numbers. You want to go out to trade shows and continue to do things of that nature.
There's actually so many channels right now. We could probably list hundreds, if not thousands.
Indeed, right. And underneath AI, as you mentioned, Perplexity and all the others, right? Like this AI in and of itself is its own channel, AI chatbots. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, and the thing is people really have to understand the changes in buyer behavior and why it's important to be everywhere and all this other stuff. Perplexity just actually launched their Perplexity Shopping, I believe, and it's an AI agent where I can actually say, "Hey, Perplexity, buy me a size 11 on cloud black sneaker," and it already has my credit card on file. It
Yeah.
will buy the shoe for me at the best price unless I specify a store, and will pay for it and ship it to my house all with one command. But when you have the brands, and then you can say, look, can you buy it from Zappos? Can you buy it from Nordstrom? Can you buy it from whatever? So there's so many things that you have to understand. Again, Andrew, this is just a wonderful phrasing that you did about the investment portfolio. It's understanding like that investment portfolio, the bigger picture, the strategy behind it. It's the one who's got the best, the best strategy that ultimately is going to win. And I bring that up because, well, that might sound obvious. A good strategy will beat a bigger budget every single time. And so
Yeah.
strategy first, budget second. So Andrew, people want to learn more about you and Core and More Technologies. Where do we send them?
Well, they can come directly to our website at www.core, that's COREAND, and more, MORE, technologies with a T, CEH.com. Or they could type in Core and More Tech if that's easier. But either one will direct to our website, and they can reach out to us through any of the channels that are available there, or connect with us on social media. We're everywhere. We're on LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter. As you were just talking about, Charles, that the customer journey will become seamless. By leveraging AI to unify customer data across channels, brands are going to create connected interactions across all platforms. And there's a concept I'm going to drop on you right now. It's called Phi Digital, PHYGITAL, shopping experiences. Brands are preparing for a future where digital, physical, and social channels blend into one continuous and engaging experience. It's already here with us. It's just not public yet. But when it comes public, man, every e-commerce brand better be ready for that.
Amen. We started talking about SEO and the EAT algorithm. We talked about the investment approach. We talked about PPC. We talked about retargeting. We talked about omnichannel. Look, at the end of the day, if digital is such a huge place, whether you're B2B or B2C, it's critical to understand how to play that game well, because it's the first place people go when they're looking for an answer to their problem. It's the first place people go when they're looking for a solution, when they're looking for a vendor, when they're looking whatever. They're going to go to these search engines. And if you're nowhere to be found, you can have the best product, you can have the best service. People can't find you. It doesn't actually do you any good.
Yeah.
So you really got to make sure that people find you. And keep in mind, it's worth repeating that regardless of where your budget is now, a good strategy will outcompete a big budget all day long.
All day long.
Have the right strategy. Have the right strategy, and then, maximize the budget as you can afford. So this wraps up today's episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. Don't forget to check out Andrew Young over at Core and More Technologies. And for more tips, strategies, and information for growing your business, for getting more predictable profits, making a company less dependent on you, and all that other fun stuff, check us out over at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Cadet with my friend Andrew Young, and I will see you in another episode.